Hi! This lecture is entitled Writing Nationalism, and it's all about language script during the Spanish colonial period. Let's start! Okay, so first, let's remember that the Spanish orthography was introduced in the 16th century in the Philippines. What does it mean? So, it means that there were new letters introduced in the system of writing. So, for example, you have not just A, B, C, you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, L, M, N, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, X, Y, and Z. Let's backtrack a little. Okay? Why? Before the coming of the Spaniards, the Filipinos actually had a system of writing called the Baybayin. And in the Baybayin, if you look at the letters of the Baybayin, you don't find some of these letters introduced in the 16th century. In particular, they didn't have the letter C, they didn't have the letter L, they didn't have N or RR, nor the letter Z. And so the letters changed, and that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, now I'm going to look at, and these are several texts. So first, this lecture comes from observations by, number one, Virgilio Almario. And this is from his text, Tradisyon at Wikang Filipino, translated into English, Tradition and the Filipino Language, 1997. I also did my own study of A la Purísima Virgen y Verdadera Madre de Dios, Madre Rey. You find that in Francisco de San Jose's Arte y Reglas de la Lengua Tagala, written in 1610. I also did a study of Modesto de Castro's pagsusulatan ng dalawang binibini na si Urbana at Felisa na nagtuturo ng mabuting kaugalian. So, the translation of this is letters between two young women, Urbana and Felisa, and these letters teach fine manners, written in 1864. Why did I have these two studies? Because I was trying to compare the letters in 1610 to the letters in 1864. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so you have to remember that one of the significant developments during the Spanish colonial period in terms of letters was that the letter K was not used at all. Instead, for the letter K, they used the letter C. So an example of this is kapantay. And now, of course, you spell kapantay as kapantay with a K, meaning like equal. And you also have the word kaaway, meaning enemy. Then you also have the letter Q. They also use the letter K instead of the letter, they also use the letter Q instead of the letter K. For example, kinalulugdan, meaning something one is fond of, or dakila, or great. And notice the Q in the middle of the word, okay? They also used CQ, such as bakin. Now, we don't say bakin, it has now evolved, and now we say bakit. And in English, that means why. Okay. Now, that also was true for the letter W. The letter W was substituted by the diphthong IW. So, the diphthong IW was spelled IO. So, for example, now we say mapangaliw, right? Meaning gives pleasure. At that time, you spell that mapangaliw. So, liw, see that? It's spelled as I-O. And now, of course, because we don't know that, if we're looking at this word mapangaliw and we see the I-O, you're thinking, oh, maybe it's pronounced mapangalio. So it's a little bit confusing nowadays when you see this. But at that time, when people saw I-O, they knew that that would be pronounced mapangaliw. Okay? And then you also have aliw. So, during the Spanish period, what I'm trying to say is this word aliw, which we now today as spelled ALIW, meaning pleasure, was spelled at that time as ALIU. Now, what about the diphthong AW? At that time, it was spelled AO. Oh, ow was spelled AO instead of AW, such as malinaw, now spelled malinaw AW, meaning clear. And this was found in San Jose. Why am I trying to say all these things, the letter K and the letter W? For many of you, you will read texts written maybe during the Spanish colonial period. So when you see these words, you're thinking, how do I pronounce this? And what are these words? You'll find these words as mapangaliw or aliw or malinaw, or even, remember earlier we were looking at the word bakin. And you're thinking, what does bakin mean? Well, it's what is now called as bakit, right? And mapangaliw is now called mapangaliw. Okay? So, it now helps you understand or read texts written during the Spanish colonial period. Let's move on. Okay. Similarly, let's look at the letter F. The letter F, this is really strange, it was actually used for the sound of S, such as in the words fanglibutan. So actually, when I was studying this text, I was thinking, what is fanglibutan? And then, but it's not fanglibutan. You're supposed to say it as sanglibutan. And sanglibutan simply means the whole world. Now look at the word kafalanan. It's not kafalanan, it's kasalanan, meaning wrongdoing. Okay? And again, this now gives us a clue as to how we can read this text written during that period. Now, but these things change. This would not be true anymore in the 19th century texts. Thus, we might tend to believe that it could be because of printing limitations in the earlier texts. Okay, now let's look at the letter nang. Okay, so the written nang was written as G with a, that symbol above it, as in the words mga. It's a word that indicates the plural form of the noun following it, and langit. So there should be a symbol like that on top of the G in this word, and that's how you know that that's supposed to be the letter nang.